Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of The Thread. Today we are talking all about your customer. What does this mean? Is this an important thing to do in a fashion brand? What stage do you need to be even thinking about this? How do you develop a customer avatar? We're going to dive into all of this today. And so I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Kendall. I'm a former mentor for people starting their fashion brands from scratch. I'm a Parsons graduate, and I also had my own women's wear brand for about 7 years. So at this point, I've seen a lot of people launch, and I've seen, it took me a few years to really realize how important it was to have a customer avatar. I was a few years into my brand before I even took it seriously. But since mentoring people and reflecting on my own brand experience, I have come to realize that this is an incredibly important piece of the puzzle, especially to work on at the beginning. You need to have a customer in mind. You need to develop this customer, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I want you to know that no matter how far along you are, I'm telling you most of these tips because either I have made the mistake of not doing it, or I've seen other people make the mistake of not doing it. So I know it's important. And that's why we're covering all of this in our foundation series, which is what this series is. If you haven't watched the other, I think there's 3 other episodes in this series so far. This is the 4th one. So I'll link that down below. Be sure to go watch all of those in order if you can, because I kind of reference the past ones that I do, and they kind of build on each other. So go watch that series, and I really hope that all of these tips are so helpful for you to start to build your brand, or even to start to think about if you want to build a brand. You have all the information here. I'm not being vague. I'm not trying to gatekeep because I'm trying to sell you something. I just truly want to help more independent brands set up successful businesses. So first of all, your customer avatar, your target customer, your ideal customer are all names for basically the person that you're trying to sell to. Yes, they're imaginary, but they also become very, very real because hopefully you are making a product to solve a problem for a certain person, a certain type of person. And it's not just about having a customer so you can sell to them. Having a customer and knowing who your customer is also helps with how you communicate, what you communicate, your voice, your tone, the words that you use, your aesthetic, your branding, right? If you're trying to reach somebody specific, you're going to use a certain look, a certain aesthetic to your brand that might appeal to that person. And you don't want to appeal to anybody, right? Go back and watch my last episode. You don't want to appeal to everybody. You want to get somebody's attention that is the person that you want and you think should be buying your products that you're selling. So think about it like this, like say that everybody I mentor always starts off really broad, which I understand. They're like, I want to make everything in the world, do every idea I've ever had, but I tell them to get specific, right? And that was in my last video. So think about if you have, for instance, a maternity brand. Well, you need to get really specific about who you're making that for. Are you making a maternity brand for like a crunchy granola mom who's like a cloth diaper lover, a breastfeeding queen? Or are you making maternity wear for the mom that works full-time, that has a career, that needs to pump at work maybe and needs to look polished and put together? Those two are very different ends of the spectrum in terms of like branding, the look, the logo, the fonts, the tone of voice you're going to use, right? So you need to think about this stuff early on so that you can communicate effectively and get that person's attention, basically. It also is going to help you, evolve your brand over time because you're thinking about your customer and you're thinking about their needs. And as you're growing your brand, as you're expanding, adding new products, you're going to go back to this kind of blueprint over and over again. And this person is going to essentially serve as a muse so that you can develop your brand in a way that still serves your customer, right? And it's very helpful when you have to make those business decisions, like what fabric, what color should I have for this next season? right? Look to your customer. Think about what your customer would want. What is their lifestyle calling for? Also, it helps you determine pricing. That's a big one. And I'm hopefully going to do an episode on that too. So like I said, this is all very important stuff to define at the beginning as early as possible, though I've encountered a lot of people, myself included, that have been, they've had their brand for years and they've never really thought about the customer. But I can tell you, they're probably holding on for dear life because they're not really clear on what they're doing or who they're selling to, right? I think we've all seen those brands. I can think of a few off the top of my head, the brands that kind of appear and they're kind of all over the place, like they're sort of a hot mess, and you're like, what is this? Who's gonna buy this? Somebody does, probably, but it's really unclear, it's jumbled, it doesn't really make any sense. It kind of seems like the designer's just doing whatever they want. So we want to avoid that, right? Because we want to be in this for the long haul. So there's kind of two ways to approach this when you start a brand. Number one is that you start with a customer, right? Maybe you're thinking like, oh, my sister has a big butt and she's always complaining about like not being able to find a good swimsuit that really fits her like hourglass shape and has full coverage, right? So that's just an example. If your sister has a big butt, I'm sorry, but maybe you can help solve her problem, right? So you're starting with a customer and with a problem in mind, and you're going, what can I do to serve this customer? And that's really helpful because you're starting out with a real person that you can actually talk to, right? Alternately, you can start with a product idea and then you kind of determine who your customer is going to be based on kind of what need it fulfills, right? So like the maternity clothing example, right? If you've got an idea for a put together maternity dress or a couple of styles of dresses that you can maybe lift it up and pump or something, you're probably going to want to target the working mom that might need to look polished and put together at work. So hopefully, your product, it's kind of letting you know who would buy it. And let me tell you, if you can't really come up with somebody, or it's not clear, or it's really confusing, like who would buy this besides like me? It's probably a sign that you need to go take a really hard look at your product and make sure that it is wanted and needed, and you're not just like doing it just to be a designer or have a brand. You know what I mean? Like you want to serve some purpose. And if you're a little unclear, maybe go back to the market research stage and be sure that you're doing something and that you're offering something that people are going to want. And then you can kind of hone in on, well, okay, who wants this? Who is this going to serve? What type of lifestyle? What type of person? And then you can start to hone in on who your customer would be and really start to target them, really start to communicate with them. So let me get to my little story that I have. So when I was working as a mentor for people starting their brands, I'd say about 90% of them came to the program just being at the very, very beginning stage. But about 10% would come, after they've not quite launched, maybe they have launched, or maybe they're about to launch their brand or something like that, and they've tried to do it on their own and they just need more support. They needed more guidance, they had questions, they felt isolated or whatever. So this woman started working with me and joined the program when she was pretty far along. She was like in the pre-development stage. So that means she already had samples done, or she was in the pre-production stage. So she was like in the development stage, pre-production stage, before she started to produce things. So she had patterns done, samples done. She had even had her samples in some runway shows. She was such a great person, such a hard worker, and she had done so much work on her brand already. So when she started working with me, I'm like, okay, this is great. Like, you have pictures of all of your stuff, like send them to me. I want to get to know your aesthetic, your product, all that stuff. And so she had about 12 styles, too many, Too many for a first launch. Okay, but that's beside the point. So she kind of wanted my help pricing, figuring out pricing and figuring out, she couldn't really afford to go into production with all of these things. So she wanted help like narrowing this down. So she started sending me pictures of the samples that she had, and like all 12 of them came in, and I was so confused because these styles were all over the place. Like there were some that were really feminine, beautiful, looked kind of like upscale luxury, like velvet and silk pieces. And then there were like menswear with like a flannel button down and the sleeves ripped off and stuff. And I was like, I'm so confused at what's happening. Like there was a lot of people, like I said at the beginning, that want to do menswear, women's wear. You want to, like, your first impulse is to have a brand for everyone. So I was like, okay, is this menswear, women's wear? Like, do you want to maybe start with one or the other? She's like, no, I want my brand to be unisex. I was like, this isn't giving like gender fluid or unisex. This is really like two, not just opposite ends of the spectrum, like opposite ends of everything, of luxury, of, it didn't make any sense. So I kept trying to push her and be like, well, who's your customer? Like, who are you envisioning? What do you envision like a photo shoot looking like? And she was really vague, and she didn't really answer. I think she was kind of confused. And I kept on her because she still had all these decisions to make about what to launch and what photo shoot to do. And I could not get on board with this collection. It didn't make any sense. It was not cohesive at all. And I was like, you got to tell me about your customer. Like, what is happening here? Who is this person? Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking. And then she said something to me that really made it all make sense. She said, actually, I'm struggling with who my customer is. I was like, oh, yes, this makes so much sense, because she had, doing it all on her own. Of course, we don't know everything. We don't know much. She had skipped the whole part in the beginning where you really need to think about a specific customer, right? You need to pick a niche. You need to do something and do that well. Well, she was trying to make a brand for everyone, men, women, very feminine, very masculine, super luxury, casual, like, that's that impulse that I was talking about. So that was really the moment for me as a mentor, even though I had had a brand for years, that was really the moment where I realized how crucial it is to have a customer in mind at the beginning, right? Especially if your impulse is to kind of do something for everybody, right? Especially if your dream one day is to have this big brand where you offer, a little bit of everything. You have to start small, and that includes really narrowing down the customer. So that was a big lesson for both of us. Now I want to talk about how to determine who your customer really is and really like flesh them out. So your homework for today is to sit down, open up a Google Doc, and say, okay, I'm going to write a full page, single space, maybe 2 pages about my customer and who they are and what they do for a living. What is their lifestyle like? How much do they make? Not only that, more importantly, how much do they spend? Like, do they love quality things? Are they willing to invest in quality or not? Are they kind of like, they want the best deal? What is their lifestyle demand? What are their weekends like? What do they wear to work? What kind of things do they need in their life? Do they have kids? So when I realized the importance of this, I came up with 2 customer avatars, basically. Both women, because I had a women's wear line, both interested in sustainability, both interested in ethical fashion, and they had the same aesthetic, of course, because they would both be buying from me. So of course they have to like how my brand looks, but they have slightly different lifestyles. So you can do that as well. You can come up with 2 avatars. And as you launch your brand and your brand grows, and maybe you get to know some of the actual customers in real life, your customer avatar might change, it might morph a little bit over time, but generally the purpose of this is to serve as a blueprint for all of your decisions, all of your design choices. Every time you're designing for a new season, you think of this person as your muse, right? So one of the things that I learned at Parsons when I was getting a fashion design degree, I think one of the most important things is that you take yourself out of it. This is not about you. And if it's about you, maybe you need to take a good hard look at that. I understand everybody wants to be a designer. It seems really glamorous, but ultimately this has to be about the customer. And if it's not about the customer at all, you're going to get into trouble a few years down the road, because you have to be offering something to somebody that needs it, like I said. And if you're just in there doing whatever you want, oh, this looks cool, I want to do this next season, it's going to be a hot mess. It's going to be a jumble. It's going to be confusing, and you're not going to really attract the loyal customers that you want. So that is your homework. And also to build on that, kind of once you get a sense of who your customer is, maybe what they do for a living, start to figure out where they actually hang out in real life. So like my example of professional working moms, right? You've got to be able to find some Reddit forums, Facebook groups, something like that, mommy and me groups, I don't know, something like that, where you can actually start to talk to the real customers that might buy your products. And this is where you can send them surveys. Say you join a Facebook group, you come in and you say, hey, I've got this idea for this new brand, and you guys are like my target customers. I really want to see if you like this. Do you like the look of it? What do you feel like you need in your life? What's missing from the market? And this is where you can start to really serve somebody specific. And trust me, you guys, this is a great way to build up an audience before you even launch as well. So that's a little bonus. So I hope that video helped. Join me for my next video, which I don't know what it's going to be yet, but we're going to keep building on these little foundations. So let me know in the comments below what you'd like to hear me talk about. Have you come up with a customer? What was that experience like for you? Do you think it helped? Do you think it gave it more clarity? I would love to know, and be sure to like and subscribe and share with anyone that could benefit. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys really soon.